Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Israel defending itself from continuing mortar and drone attacks along the borders. Meanwhile, health authorities are advising serious caution to all Israelis planning any sort of trips abroad. And finally, a pink supermoon over Jerusalem ahead of the BaOmer holidays. Stay tuned for the details. The raucous weekend marked by large-scale clashes in Jerusalem and rocket fire from Gaza seemingly quieting down now. This after Israeli authorities threaten heavy military action against the next provocation. That said, the IDF is still with their hands full along the northern and southern Israeli borders. Tuesday night, Israeli forces reportedly shooting down a Hezbollah drone that crossed from Lebanon into northern Israel. And this after Israeli troops earlier that day located yet another Hezbollah drone that had reportedly been shot down several weeks ago. The IDF concluding that both drones were sent to gather intelligence. Meanwhile, ignoring Jerusalem's threats of retaliation in response to the at least 36 rockets launched over the weekend, Palestinian terrorists in the Gaza Strip firing 2 more rockets towards Israel overnight, triggering red alert sirens near the Kisufim communities. Both mortar shells fell inside the coastal enclave, however. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responding to the recent threats at the latest cabinet meeting.
לאחר ישיבת הקבינט קיבלנו החלטות להיערך לכל תרחיש. זו ההנחיה שאני ושר הביטחון הנחינו את צה"ל, והוא אכן ערוך לכל תרחיש. אתמול היה לילה שקט, מקווה שימשך כך. אנחנו בונים לכל התפתחות, לא מציע לאויבים שלנו לנסות אותנו.
Moving along, international tensions steadily rising in the region, with Iran unveiling an army of small kamikaze drones, as well as leaked, allegedly high-level conversations that may put former Secretary of State John Kerry in hot water with Israel. In the latest of Iran's muscle-flexing ceremonies, Tehran showing off a series of small kamikaze drones with cutting-edge radar technology, while further touting that they can strike Israel or anywhere else in the Middle East. Information on whether these latest drones actually work, however, as well as how they are guided, propelled, and launched, remains unclear. In any case, the United States and Israel are taking these latest developments very seriously. The two countries reportedly actively working together on efforts to confront Iran's army of attack drones, as well as Iran's growing arsenal of precision-guided missiles, including, for example, the announcement of an interagency Israel-American group that'll be particularly focused on these threats. United States officials then going on to underscore President Biden's, quote, unwavering support for Israel's right to defend itself, end quote. Such claims of support are undermined, however, by a recently leaked conversation involving Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif. Zarif alleging in the recording that former Secretary of State and now Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry released information on Israeli airstrikes in Syria to Iran. Kerry, for his part, though, took to Twitter late Tuesday night to firmly deny these allegations. And the UK-based Persian-language television station is likewise casting doubt on the truthfulness of these claims, saying Israeli airstrikes in Syria were already made public by international media. Meanwhile, as Israel and the United States beginning new partnerships in the region, the Biden administration finally throwing around some potential names for the still vacant ambassador to Israel position. And Thomas Nides, a former State Department official, now emerging at the top of that list. Here to discuss what that means is expert on the Middle East and United States-Israel ties, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Yoram Ettinger. Yoram, Ambassador, thank you so much for being with us. Now, Nides, who is Jewish, is supposedly known to have pro-Israel sensibilities. How does he compare, though, to Trump's ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, who some go so far as to characterize as biased towards Israel?
Both are extremely different from one another. Unlike Ambassador Friedman, who understood that Israel's control of the Golan Heights does serve America's best interest, the proposed ambassador of President Biden considers the Golan Heights to be on the negotiation table as part of Syrian-Israeli bargaining element. The Friedman administration state of mind realized that the Palestinian issue must not have a veto power over Arab-Israeli peace negotiation. On the other hand, the proposed ambassador considers the Palestinian issue to be a central issue in the Middle East, in Arab politics, and the crux of the Arab-Israeli conflict, none of which have anything to do with reality. And certainly the proposed ambassador by President Biden is more or less a copy-paste of the Department of State worldview. Namely, when it comes to Iran's ayatollahs, there should not be a regime change. There should not be any extra pressure on the ayatollahs. And just like Secretary of State Tony Blinken, just like National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, and just like President Biden.
So again, maybe let's go a little bit deeper into what you were just talking about. How does the Palestinian Authority and Iran really fit into the grand scheme of Middle East security and foreign policy with respect to Israel and the United States? Do you have any predictions on the effect that NIDES will have in dealing with the threats that these entities pose?
Well, there's no doubt that the new ambassador, and by the way, regardless who the new ambassador will be, that new ambassador will reflect the worldview of the president and the worldview of Secretary Blinken, who literally, basically sets a foreign policy, national security policy of the Biden administration. And as such, the new ambassador to Israel will provide tailwind to the Palestinian Authority, possibly will raise the energy of Hamas in Gaza, and certainly will bolster the pressure on Israel to retreat from the mountain ridges of Judea and Samaria. Once again...
Well, effectively speaking, though, do you see that Israel is going to be put in a dangerous position, or at the end of the day, will Israel's safety come to the fore and be considered?
Well, it's going to revert back to the pre-Trump administration routine, the routine which prevailed from Truman in 1948 all the way through the Obama-Biden administration, which ended in January 2017, namely a routine replete with disagreements, friction, sometimes punishment, just like suspension of supply of military hardware, combat planes, etc. However, that routine also featured the very unique cooperation between the two countries, because stronger than misperception by the foreign policy establishment in Washington, the misperception about the Middle East, much stronger is the reality of the stormy Middle East, the stormy world, which highlight the unique benefits drawn by the U.S. from Israel, which in this stormy atmosphere constitutes the most reliable and effective and democratic ally of the U.S., which constitutes a force multiplier extending the hand of the U.S. without requiring additional American soldiers. And my assessment is we're going to see more and more tension and disagreement, but at the same time, more and more realization.
All right, Ambassador Ettinger, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Moving on, our daily COVID update coming with more and more breakthroughs in Israel's response to the pandemic. Israeli authorities announcing that soon even more virus restrictions will be lifted. But at the same time, in the absence of legal regulations, government officials are advising citizens to exercise extra self-restraint and to prevent another outbreak. Hannah Rifkin reporting.
Coronavirus vaccine stocks in Israel are replenished now, and infection numbers have practically never looked better. Nearly 58% of the total population has been fully vaccinated, leading to a spread rate holding around 0.3%. New daily infections then reduced to just 86, and the number of serious cases and deaths likewise dropping by the day.
כולנו מרגישים את זה ואנשים שמחים, הולכים וחיים את חייהם ואפילו חוגגים את חגיגותיהם בשמחה גדולה.
But while praising the nation's achievements in the face of the pandemic, including a drop in unemployment and a relatively stable economy, Netanyahu and health ministry officials both warning that at any moment, everything could be lost.
כדי להמשיך אותם, אנחנו צריכים להבטיח שההישגים שלנו לא יוסבו לאחור על ידי כניסה של וריאנטים קטלניים. ולכן אנחנו בודקים כרגע את הצעדים הנדרשים לעצור כניסה ממדינות שבהן אכן מתפשטים הווריאנטים האלה, ואנחנו עושים הכל כדי למנוע את זה. אנחנו נקבל החלטות בזמן הקרוב ביותר.
Among the warnings, the health ministry again begging Israelis, even those who are vaccinated, to avoid unnecessary travel out of the country, especially to destinations where the outbreak is still rampant or where no new variants are present. Specifically, Ukraine, Ethiopia, Brazil, Mexico, South Africa, Turkey, and India. India in particular being one of the countries in which the pandemic is again spreading brutally. Netanyahu instructing the National Security Council to help in any way possible wherever possible.
ראשית, אני מבקש לשלוח בשם כל שרי הממשלה וכל אזרחי ישראל את תנחומינו לראש ממשלת הודו, ידידי נרנדרה מודי, וכמובן לאזרחי הודו, על באמת אובדן החיים הכל כך טרגי שמתרחש שם, ואני באמת מקווה יהיה מאמץ בינלאומי שישראל מוכנה להיות שותפה מלאה בו כדי לעצור את הטרגדיה הזאת, כי בשעה שאנחנו כאן שמחים, אנחנו עדיין מבינים שחלקים גדולים של האנושות סובלים סבל גדול.
We've heard about descendants of European Jewry returning to communities in Europe, largely abandoned by the Jews or wishing at least to reclaim their heritage and citizenship in order to get a European passport. And eligibility for European citizenship, this time, particularly in Romania, is becoming of high interest in the past several years. Those who wish to take advantage will likely want some help in navigating the system, though. And here with more is Michael Decker of Cohen, Decker, Pex, and Brosh Law Offices. Michael, thanks so much for being with us. Now, who is qualified to obtain Romanian citizenship in this way, and are they considered returning citizens, or is there some other status that they're given?
Well, Romania has a very generous policy regarding reclaiming citizenship. And it is very, very relevant to descendants of Jews, and you can find them also in Israel and also all over North American countries today. Basically, Romania at one point had almost 750,000 Jews living in its borders, and most of them left Romania. Those also that weren't unfortunately victims of World War II, and their descendants are eligible today with certain conditions to reclaim basically Romanian citizenship.
So if you could sum it up, what does the process involve? How long does it take?
So basically, we're dealing with three main sections of the law that would apply on descendants of Romanian citizens. Basically, we have Section 5, Section 10, and Section 11. Section 5 is rarely used because it's dealing with a direct descendant of an actual citizen. Usually we deal with Section 10 and 11. Section 10 goes to the third generation, and Section 11 goes to the fourth generation. Section 10 basically deals with those that were born in the territories of Romania as we know them today. And Section 11 deals with the greater borders of Romania, because Romania used to have bigger borders, and those that were born in the greater borders but then lost their citizenship because of the change of borders, basically can bequeath the citizenship up until the fourth generation. Most Section 10 and 11 are the sections that apply usually because whenever people left Romania, they almost automatically lost their citizenship. So usually we're dealing with people that lost their citizenship, but still up until the third and fourth generation, depending on Section 10 or 11, the descendants can reclaim Romanian citizenship.
So what does one need to present to prove that they are qualified for citizenship?
The main requirement and the first initial requirement that you need to present is a birth certificate. Sometimes, unfortunately, it's not even possible to locate the birth certificate, especially if people were born in like rural areas that aren't even part of Romania anymore. But even then, we have located birth certificates in very extraordinary situations. But the first questions we would usually ask are exactly where were your grandparents or great-grandparents born, and if you have the birth certificate. If you do not have the birth certificate, before we can even take on a case, we need to first locate it, and that can take a couple months, but thankfully many times it is possible to locate a birth certificate, and once we locate the birth certificate, it's usually just red tape. Sometimes the cases are more complicated because, for example, when many of these Romanian Jews made Aliyah, they received Hebrew names in Israel, and then the names aren't identical to the names on the Romanian documents, which forces us to then go to court. And
fun challenges. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess I have to ask, do new immigrants to Romania, are they getting any certain benefits as a returning citizen? What are the advantages here?
Well, the main advantages is that ever since 2007, Romania, partially at least, is part of the EU, and once you're part of the EU, you're part of a whole continent that's still today one of the most privileged continents to live in, and here basically we're dealing with the option of receiving citizenship without living in Romania or in the EU. So basically it allows someone just to hold a Romanian passport, which then gives them the option to live anywhere in Europe, to work anywhere in Europe, to study in Europe with reduced costs, and even to enjoy sometimes the different health benefits that European countries have to offer. And I'm sure also that many of these descendants can also contribute to Europe and be of great benefit to the EU itself. So it's not just a one-sided thing.
Mutual benefit. I love it. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us and breaking this down. I know that there are a lot of people, I'm sure, who are very excited to jump in on this opportunity. Michael Decker, thank you so much.
With pleasure.
In other news, aside from the coming holiday festivities, the cosmos providing another reason to gawk and feel inspired. A so-called full pink supermoon, the first of 3 to be expected in the coming months, shining above Jerusalem for 3 consecutive days starting Tuesday. So what is a full pink supermoon, though? Well, unfortunately, first off, it's not actually pink. It's just called a pink full moon because it's in April, around the same time as the blooming of the moss pink herb. But apart from that, it's still an incredible sight, as the moon will appear about 10 to 20% larger than normal due to it being in perigee, or about as close to Earth as the moon ever gets during its elliptical orbit. The next supermoons this year being expected around May 26th and June 24th. So what do Lag BaOmer and supermoons have to do with one another apart from their apparently coincidental timing? Well, joining me now with the answer is Secretary General of the Confederation of United Zionists and by now a great personal friend, Rabbi Dov Lipman. Rabbi, thanks so much for being with us again. We just spoke about the pink supermoon that was just overhead in Jerusalem. Is there any connection or significance to Lag BaOmer and a full moon? And also, what is Lag BaOmer about?
The moon has tremendous significance in Jewish tradition. In fact, the story of the Jewish people is compared to the moon, which starts out completely dark, eventually works its way towards the full moon, fully bright. It goes back down dark again, but no one ever doubts that it's going to come back again. And that is the story of the Jewish people, our ability to survive all the persecution, all the destruction, and come back with complete and total renewal, as we see now, going from the Holocaust to the state of Israel. And that relates directly to Lag BaOmer. Because Lag BaOmer is interesting. On the one hand, it's talked about as the time when the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped passing away. There were 24,000 who passed away. They weren't acting properly towards one another. And we celebrate when they stopped dying. That seems a little bit strange. But the answer is Rabbi Akiva, even after he lost all his students, he went, he found 5 new students, and he rebuilt the Torah and the tradition of the Jewish people, again, signifying this idea of perseverance and rebuilding from destruction. And therefore, there is a great reason for celebration of Lag BaOmer, and it does actually connect to the moon, as you mentioned.
All right, so now let's get into the modern day. What are some of the different beliefs and traditions and practices for this holiday?
The truth is, if you look back historically in our tradition, there's not much about it, but certainly in Israel, it has become a day where every single person who just wants to go and start a fire has the opportunity to do so. As we see children throughout Israel putting together these bonfires, certainly communities do so, schools, youth groups, and even the big one that's traditionally done in Meron. That fire comes from 2 places. One is, traditionally, this is the date where the great mystical work, the Zohar, was released to the world, and therefore, that's this great fire of understanding and teachings that were brought down. But I also think it relates to exactly what we were talking about before, that we go out when it's nighttime, when it's dark, which symbolizes exile, which symbolizes the downtrodden people who are being persecuted, and we light the bonfire and we say, that darkness does not bring us down. We are back and we are strong. And that's the number one tradition which we certainly have on this date.
So I think in line with that, I'll give you now a minute to give us a special 2021 message to pass along to our viewers for this year's Lag BaOmer, especially in light of the holiday restrictions last year.
Sure, and there's also going to be restrictions this year. I don't believe they're allowing the bonfires to take place as they usually do. The message is very specific. No matter what we experience, and in this case, we're talking about the world, certainly with Corona, but look at Israel. No matter what we experience, it's hard, it's difficult, there's loss, there's sacrifice, but we keep on persevering. No matter what is coming in the current events, and we're constantly hearing of so many struggles on a security level, an economic level, certainly a political level. All those things are interesting, they can be aggravating at times, and certainly there are losses which we suffer, but we keep on going. And that is the message of this Lag BaOmer. As we begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel with Corona, let us all realize that that is the ability that all of us have to persevere through whatever we're going through and emerge even stronger on the other side. That is the message of Rabbi Akiva with his optimism, and that is what we have to remember as the people of Israel.
Rabbi Dov Lipman, Chag Sameach, happy holidays, and thank you so much for joining us again today.
Happy holiday. Thank you so much.
Now, lastly, just your usual Tuesday night in Tel Aviv, a man walking into a luxurious skyscraper in the heart of the country, accompanied by his horse. On Tuesday night, security cameras capturing the bizarre situation, a man entering the elevator in the Tel Aviv apartment complex accompanied by his equine companion. And the two riding the elevator all the way up to the 6th floor, reportedly to visit a friend. Footage of the event making its way into the WhatsApp group for the residents of the building, though, causing a big uproar. And police launching an investigation into the incident, already arresting 2 suspects, while also involving veterinary services. In any case, the moral of the story is, of course, that next time you push an elevator button, be prepared for anything. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast with Chana Rifkin.
Happy Wednesday! This week is flying by fast. Must be the lovely weather. Now, tonight and tomorrow, Israel's calling for clear skies and lows this evening resting in the mid-teens in Celsius. By the way, perfect for stargazing. And tomorrow, ending the work week with highs in the 20s and 30s. As I said, slow rise in temperatures, and here we are.
And now before we go, let's take a look at what is going viral in Israel. Well, apparently, yeah, just another day in Israel. We have horses running rampant and elevators, high-rise buildings, and now going opposite in main roads. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.25 shekels to the American dollar and 2.62 shekels to the Canadian dollar. And finally, for the latest updates and news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as to our newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Aaron Porras. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.